Hello and welcome to our episode 132. You may have noticed already after 3 seconds in, this is a different episode. And you know why? Because you, our community, recently overwhelmingly voted for having and inviting English speaking guests. So we went out and we thought about doing that. And we thought, Tolkien, okay, podcast, okay. How could we possibly ask? And there is a rather simple solution. Guess who? He really needs no introduction, but let me just say he's the host of the Prancing Pony Podcast. He's doing today's Tolkien Times, and in fall, returning obviously as the Rings of Power wrap up. He's also the author with the equally amazing Shawn Marchese of Why We Love Middle Earth, and it's absolutely wonderful for us to welcome our first English-speaking guest, Alan Sisto. Hello and welcome, Alan.
Hello and thank you. And I'm grateful that it's an English-speaking day because my German is incredibly rusty. Don't even want to tell you how many years ago it was that I took German in college. So
We shall very much test your high school German today. No worries.
oh, please don't. I will fail miserably.
Oh, man.
All I remember is verbs at the end. That's pretty much all I remember.
And that is a very wise choice with German. No worries.
All right.
Now, guys, where do you want to start? Fingolfin usually has one very, very good question that we always ask at the beginning of an episode.
Yeah,
okay.
it's the question: how do you become a Tolkien fan? And what's the starting?
How did I become? I like the question because on our show we often ask people how they first came to Tolkien, right? So that's actually a different answer than how I became a Tolkien fan. So, I may have first been exposed to Tolkien when I was 9 years old and 9 years old and saw the Rankin and Bass Hobbit special when it was first broadcast. Yes, I know. Thank you very much. I'm old. I was then given a copy of that book. In fact, I think I have it still here. This book was my first Tolkien book. It was given to me and it's completely falling apart. But it's got all the artwork from the original Rankin and Bass version of the Hobbit. So that's how I was exposed to Tolkien, but I can't say that I became a huge fan right away. I enjoyed it, of course, but I enjoyed a lot of other things. I think my fandom began in high school when I first discovered the Fellowship of the Ring and the rest of the Lord of the Rings, because that book didn't have the little thing at the back that says also by the author. So I didn't know that there was anything else. I'm 9 years old. Who's going to tell me? So, there's certainly no internet to inform me. So I end up finding out about it as a freshman in high school, so 13 to 14 years old, and I pick up the books. I don't have that set anymore. They're they completely disintegrated. I believe Sweet was the cover artist of those. So they were the blue Fellowship of the Green Two Towers and red Return of the King with Aragorn has the feather on the Return of the King as he's looking at the tree in the snow. The artwork still sticks out to me vividly. But that was when I became a fan. That was when I just absolutely fell in love with Middle Earth, and it never looked back. Absolutely never looked back. So very, very long time ago, and it was through experiencing the Lord of the Rings for the very first time.
Oh, that must have been when? Sometimes in the 1950s, 60s? I don't know.
Something. Yeah. Somewhere around there. 82, I think, would have been when I came into film.
That's one of those things, isn't it, right? Because we are like the older, still, so like the second Tolkien fan generation, we still came to it in completely different ways than most people today, right?
That is so fascinating. I remember discovering that, and really it's just an extension of logic and common sense. People who were born before us, the generation before us, they could only experience it through the books. You get to our age, and people might have been exposed to it through the rash of adaptations that came out 77 to 81. So Rankin and Bass, Hobbit, Return of the King, the Bakshi Lord of the Rings, or even the BBC radio adaptation. But then you have no adaptations at all for another 20 years before Jackson's films came out. So you've got generations that are, coming to Tolkien through different ways. And these days, you might be coming to Tolkien for the very first time through playing a video game. So it's a very different experience, and how people get to the books And of course, they always eventually get to the books. But how they get there is always an interesting story.
Extending from this question, what made you like Lord of the Rings when you first read it? And what made you stick around with it all these years after? Because it's unusual for any kind of media to be a companion for 10, 20, 30 years.
True. Yeah, I think the answers, I should say, are different. I think what made me fall in love with it was something that I didn't realize at the time until later on as I studied a little bit more and read more of Tolkien's own thoughts about his work, specifically on fairy stories and some of his letters. But what made me fall in love with Middle-earth was what I now know to be that inner consistency of reality that he talks about in On Fairy Stories. That sense of a real world, a world that's been lived in, that has its own history, that has its own people, its own languages, that's a very real place, is what drew me to it and made me feel so enamored of it. And that is part of what's drawn me back. But I think the thing that's drawn me back is that every single time I read, I learn something new. Every single time. And it's because, of course, it hits us where we are now, right? It's a very different book to read, even though it's the exact same words, maybe slightly different words, thanks to Hammond and Skull's tweaking of the text here and there. But it's virtually the same words that I read 43 years ago. And that's pretty much, why do I keep reading them? Because every time I read them, I'm coming to it with a different set of life experiences, and it speaks to me where I'm at, and I learn more. I find more. Just this last reading, which of course has been extended over 6 years of the podcast, has taught me so much. I joke about this, but it's true. When people listen to the show, you're not hearing these insights that I've been thinking about for years. You're hearing things things that I've just figured out a couple of weeks ago when I'm researching the episode. And it's just fantastic to discover so many new things every time.
I mean, what we just had last weekend was, we had pretty adverse weather conditions in Germany, a lot of rain and stuff. So instead of having your regular Tolkien days, it was like swamp New Orleans, sort of good rainy old days, Tolkien days. So people running around in, plastic boots and crap and whatever. So they could actually make it, standing knee deep in mud. And they still gave their everything. And I mean, one of our regulars from the Tolkien regulars table in Jena, she came along with the most beautiful Calabrian cosplay with a beautiful handmade, because she's a seamstress, her own dress, and all of the hem, like underneath the knee, was like dragged in about 8 kilos of mud. She had to she could weigh it as like a block of mud, and everyone went like, Irene, how can you possibly? And she said, well, it's only mud. You just take water and then you clean it and your dress is just fine.
Absolutely.
But that's the kind of experience that I love so much, that not only the texts give you such a depth and you have these layers of experiences throughout life, but then you meet other people.
Oh, yeah.
And,
the
and that
community
is the absolutely amazing thing about it. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you guys are all of an age where there might not have been as much community when you first were exposed to Middle-earth. Because I know that for me, there were like 2 or 3 other guys in my high school that, knew Tolkien, but we didn't really talk much. So it was very much a solo experience for me until the time of the Jackson films, and that's as the fandom started to grow and become an internet phenomenon. That's when we had things like line parties and pub trivia nights and things like that. And then it just, from there, the community has exploded. And it's been fantastic. I'm sorry I missed Tolkien Tage this year. I'd love to. I'm hoping that next year is finally the year. I really want to be there. It's though it sounds like I dodged a bullet this year.
Oh man.
A very wet bullet, yeah.
But the last years we had very hot. And last year, Marcel and we are going to cosplay some not usually story from Tolkien by the German
For
word.
Christmas.
Yeah, Father Christmas and the polar bear.
Oh,
And
North
Marcel
Polar Bear.
Marcel was going as a North Polar Bear.
Love that. Great idea.
I was dying inside that incredibly cheap $3.99 slick thing, and then you plastered white color into my face, and I had to. And he was hopping around as Father Christmas, and everyone loved him. All the kids loved him because
Oh, of course.
he's Father Christmas,
It's
right?
Father Christmas,
And then
right?
and then there's Grumpy Polar Bear with a
Brr,
little
brr, brr, brr.
electrical ventilator, like a little thing to sort of get some fresh air down that plastic thing that I was wearing. Marcus was enjoying himself as Father Christmas, and I
Be hard
almost
not
did as
to.
well.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good times. But yeah, the fandom is huge. I mean, and that's something that I've become really, really appreciative of over the years. I didn't realize how much the fandom meant to me until we started the podcast, right? And started to become part of that larger community in an active way. And as you know, I mean, it's being somebody involved in the Tolkien community for so long, it's fantastic. Great people.
Yeah, we have been kind of blessed in Germany because we had, when the Jackson films were getting known, 2 or 3 different teams of Tolkien fans who organized very, very nice events. Not comparable to Tolkien Tage, because it was done on castles and you had like 200 people, 300 people coming together. But for the beginning, it was a nice start. And I think some of those events still reverberate to events like Tolkien Tage still. Was there something similar in the US? Pretty sure there was, right?
The OneRing.net did a lot of events that were organized around the time of the films. There were the line parties that were organized by local groups. And then they had the Oscar parties each year. Those were fantastic. I got to go to those. They started pretty small, and for the Fellowship of the Ring, and by the time we got to Return of the King, it was, the huge thing that everybody remembers with, 20 some odd Oscars on stage, with Peter Jackson and his team up there holding up their awards, and it was quite a thing. But yeah, I would say the OneRing.net was a big part of the early days of the internet fandom. There's still, of course, a huge part of the fandom even today. Clifford and the rest of his team.
But the thing is, when we heard that there was this kind of film or maybe a trilogy coming up, it's really interesting to see how different the approaches were. The guys, the other 2 guys, Sebastian very much did this castle thing. They were like friends, people from school, students, whatever, and they just decided, let's have some really loud bands play in a courtyard of a medieval castle somewhere in Germany and just
Never a
tear the
bad
whole
idea.
thing down. Yeah, well, we have the advantage of having some castles, dotted around the landscape. So
Yeah, I've looked for one.
we
I haven't
can,
spotted one lately. Yeah.
yeah, well, you have some really nice castles, but they're usually on the more, more expensive side of things. With some of the billionaire reproduction Renaissance castles.
Well, yeah, I
Um,
suppose.
yeah,
Here in
but it
California,
was,
they're all uber modern, so
yeah, well, and it's the flair, it's the atmosphere. I mean, people came in costumes. You had all the music, and everyone was so excited just because things were sort of happening. And that was, I would like to come back to one of the points that you made. Our generation, for most of us, it was really like a lonely sort of, passion and enthusiasm because you didn't really know anyone, and without
Right.
the internet, it was pretty difficult to get this going. But that explosion of energy at that time, when people just started organizing things like pell-mell everywhere, left, right, and center, it was just so funny and so exciting and so wonderful to watch. And
Yeah.
That's one of those things when the community comes together and realizes, we could have some fun for the weekend in a castle and maybe drink a cup of tea or a couple of beers, right, Zeppo?
Marcel,
Yeah,
I'm
or
trying to imagine you drinking only tea. Yeah, it's just not happening.
a couple of corn, whatever. Yeah. But the important part was of these events in the time it was done by fans for fans. There was no corporation in the background trying to milk the community for something. And like in the Tolkien Tage is still following that spirit, and that's the amazing thing about it. That's why even if there is some struggles with the weather, you see they're trying everything they can to make it still enjoyable for everyone, and they succeeded in that. I mean, when I arrived, I was kind of frustrated about the situation on the camping ground, but after 1-2 hours and the first beers there, you know what, we'll be fine anyway.
Yeah,
but that's the thing. Yeah, it's really because on the Saturday morning when I came in and I tried to find a place where to park my bike, the guy at the security at the entrance, he told me, "It's your fault. I'm here. And I said, what? What? Yeah, 20 years ago, I came to one of your bloody stupid events, and now I'm here, and it's your fault. And a really nice lady at the, where the beer was issued, I don't know. She came up to say, hey, your name's Marcel, right? And I said, yeah. I was at the Schicksalsfest, the event that Sebastian organized 20 years ago. And she said, I'm still here. It's still the same ugly faces, man. It's the same thing all over again. I said, well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, that's
So,
why we do a podcast, man. That's why it's just audio.
yeah, but it's the thing really is, that's certainly an element that has very much to do with the text, as you mentioned, that, you come back to it with different experiences. But,
Mhm.
after 20 years, people still come back to these events because they give you almost, it's not the same thing, but it's on a similar level, I'd say. It's the new experience after 20 years. You have new people coming in, you have the old
Yes.
guys, people hang around, and it's just an
Yeah.
absolute joy to meet friends again after, like, I don't know, 5, 10, 20 years.
100%. It is a combination of the familiarity and the comfort of rereading something or of
Yeah.
being in a community of people you know, but with the addition of those new elements, the things that you never noticed before or new things. Yeah, exactly. That's a good comparison. I like that.
When
Oh my God.
when have you the idea to make a podcast and to think it's a good idea?
Oh goodness, that was the start of the show. So I've been doing a little bit of voice work. Mostly just narration, audiobooks, documentary type things, corporate narration. Nothing anybody's heard, right? No advertisements or any animation or anything. And I'd been doing some, and I've been working with a coach, and I had a VO coach as a voiceover coach suggest that one way I could get a little more conversational behind the mic would be to do a podcast. He said, "Don't worry, nobody will listen." Uh, and I thought, okay, because I thought, all right, well, we'll see how this, how this plays. And my first thought was, well, what am I going to talk about, right? It needs to be something that I know well, that I could, in theory, talk about for half an hour without any sort of script or notes. And there are only a handful of topics that, I felt comfortable enough to do that. And obviously, Tolkien was one. I quickly eliminated all the others.
We have our own
Nice
calendar
calendar,
because
Marcel.
people asked about it, and yes, we have our very own calendar involving very eloquently searched for Tolkien quotes.
Wow.
That is
Okay.
an advertisement, by the way, just to be clear, right? You
I
can.
like that. I'm now I'm thinking of ideas for
Okay.
our show. I might have to steal that. But so yeah, it was it started out that way, and all I can tell you is I remember thinking I don't want to do a solo show because there's a guy by the name of Corey Olson who'd been doing Tolkien podcasts, and I'd been listening to a few, and the guy, had more knowledge in his little finger than I had in my whole body. And I thought the last thing I need to do is try to, emulate somebody that I'm going to fail at emulating. I can't do what he does. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to do a solo show, but what about, a couple of guys talking about Tolkien? And at the time I was in a Facebook group that I'm still in, and Shawn was in there, my co-host for the first 6 years of the show and the co-author of the book with me. And I noticed that his posts during book weeks were kind of in the same vein as mine. They were detailed, they were thorough, they showed a really solid analysis of the text, but they also had a sense of humor, and we kind of would one-up each other all the time. It was like I would have one that was a little longer, then he would have one that was a little longer, then I'd include a footnote, then he'd include a reference to the letters. I'm like, oh, okay, this guy knows his stuff. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, thinking about maybe starting a Tolkien podcast. What do you think? And it was at the time, little preparation. Let's just, get together totally loose. We'll do it, maybe once or twice a month for like an hour, That didn't stick around. Obviously now it's a weekly show. We've got the 332nd episode drops today, and we've gone through the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and now we're in book 6 of the Lord of the Rings. So the rest is history, as they say. It kind of took on a life of its own once we got it started. But that was the impetus, was just wanting to be a little better at a job that I still do, but obviously Tolkien podcasting and content creation has become sort of almost my full-time thing now.
What were your initial goals? Did you have something in mind where you want to say, this is a successful podcast, I'm fine with it, how it went? And
Yeah,
I guess it's
that's a good
changed over
question.
time. So what are your goals now from going to the future?
Yeah, it really has changed over time. I think when we first started it, Shawn and I just wanted to do something fun for the community, fun for us. And we just thought if we had even, a few hundred people that would listen to the show regularly, we'd be totally happy. It was never, let's make this our day job, Um, as the show grew and as we started to turn it into a bigger thing and put more time investment into it, we realized, it might never get to full-time job status, but it could be pretty significant if we poured the time and effort into it. And so we grew it and put more time into the writing and the research and just made everything, a richer experience. And then when Shawn had to step down just about 2 years ago now in July of 2022, I knew that now I had a chance to sort of make it my day job in a way, right? Because with the two of us having to do it, it was each of us put in a little bit less time than I would on my own, or than he would on his own if it went the other way. And similarly with whatever revenue there was. And once he stepped down, it was, all right, do I let the show collapse or do I go all in? And I've gone all in. I've brought in the co-hosts from last season. Marcel got to be one of them. That was so much fun. And, people like Corey Olson and Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy on TikTok, and Matt from the Nerd of the Rings, and New Betta Do Betta from TikTok, and Dr. Sarah Brown and James Tauber. I mean, it was just an all-star list of amazing Tolkien people who all brought something new to the table. But combine that with deciding to go ahead and start the daily show, Today's Tolkien Times, and with the release of the book, which Shawn and I had been working on, long before he had to step off the show, and it just became clear that if I did a little bit more, I could make this my career in a way, and it's been a dream come true. I mean, I'm not going to get rich off of it by any stretch of the imagination, but if I could put food on my table and pay my bills and keep a roof over my head by doing what I love and pouring into the community and just engaging with the people that have come around the show, how could I ask for more? I mean, I never would have thought that I'd get there. So how do I measure success now? How I measure success now would just be, can I continue to pay my bills? Can it be the thing that enables me to pour 40 hours a week into the various channels, right? Most of it's the PPP, but quite a bit of it now is the TTT. And then coming up in August, as the show gets ready to release with Rings of Power, I'm going to be pouring time into that third podcast. And who knows, I might have another project or two on my back burner that I want to get launched at some point. So, I think the idea is there, and if I can, making it my full-time thing until I retire. And that's kind of, something that I can see down the road. I mean, I'm old enough to actually be thinking about that in 10 or 12 years time. If I were 30, it might be harder to imagine this being the rest of my career, but this could be. And it's just a real blessing, something for me to be thankful for, because the community is what makes it possible. And you guys know that. I mean, it is all about the community. So,
Yeah.
but that's how I measure success, for sure.
That's one of the things that I really need to know, and I think many members of the community have been asking this particular question. Is when you had the abbreviations PPP and TTT, why did you swap to ROP, RWP, or anything else? If you could have DDD or EEE
I tried alliteration for Rings of Power wrap up, but the problem was Rings of Power, and it already is not alliterative. So I just knew that's where I actually fell on really a kind of a cheap thing. I almost hate to acknowledge this, but I knew that if I included the words that are in the title of the TV show in the words of the title of the podcast, we would get more people to listen to it who aren't necessarily fans of the PPP. And my goal with the Rings of Power wrap up, and it has worked so far, is to bring people deeper into the texts. So people who come to the Rings of Power wrap up may have no experience with Tolkien, And I've heard this story now dozens of times. People who've been like, "Hey, I found Rings of Power wrap up because I watched the Amazon show, and I listened to you and James and Sarah, or me and Shawn early on before the episodes dropped, and now I want to read the Unfinished Tales. Now I want to read the Silmarillion." And so now I'm going to the Prancing Pony podcast and I'm getting engaged in that community and I'm listening and I'm reading the works. And that's what I want, right? I want that to be a feeder for the larger PPP community. I mean, they all exist to serve the PPP. It's the same thing with today's Tolkien Times. I'm hoping that I'll reach a new audience with that show, people who are interested in that small bite-sized daily Tolkien content, but then that they'll come to the PPP and enjoy a 6-year run through the Lord of the Rings, or a 2-year run through the Silmarillion when I do it again in a few years' time, that kind of thing.
Well, catching up on 300 plus episodes will take a little bit of time.
It will. We hear about people who catch up in extraordinarily short amounts of time. I mean, people are like, "Oh, I just heard you guys 6 months ago and I'm caught up." You're like, "How in the world did you listen to 2 episodes a day?"
And that's the point when they come into the Facebook group or on Discord and say, "Oh wow, I just found the PPP." 6 days later, "Oh, I caught up," and everyone's like, "The hell?" And then you realize, which is also a generational thing, people do listen to audio like at 150%, 200% of speed, and that is something I tried myself, and I have to be honest, I do it on stuff I really know well. But I just can't wrap my head around this, because when I go back to something on 100% speed, it tends to be a bit like fungom in The Lord of the Rings.
Treebeard. I
That
might
is
listen
actually
to Treebeard at 150%.
Lord of the
I'm with you on
Rings
that.
is fantasy at 50% speed, which is a really great metaphor for Lord of the Rings compared to a lot of modern day writing. So it works.
It's like taking a little 45 RPM single and forgetting to the turntable and leaving it at 33. Yeah. And there's like 6 people listening to this who got that reference, but you guys
one
do.
of them is Oppa.
Yeah.
But everywhere they see the movie Good Morning Vietnam. That's a special scene that Robbie Williams makes this joke on the radio show and put a single on the turntable, and this is the wrong speed, and
I do remember that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know that people will listen to it quickly, and that's kind of funny. I can't imagine then what it must be like to then hear me speak at real speed, because I already talk fast enough. I feel like I don't know how you could listen to me at even 20% increase, but I can't. Even when I used to edit the show, I could not listen at 1.2 or anything faster than just standard 100%. But yeah, people do. And we also know that people listen to us while they do their normal day-to-day lives, which I have to say, that was something that I wasn't sure would happen. Going back to COVID, we were very nervous because we knew that a lot of people listened to podcasts at the gym and on their commutes to work. And what wasn't happening after March of 2020? People were not going to the gym and people were not commuting to work. And we were concerned that, people would no longer listen to the show. And instead it turned, of course, the other way around. People turned to consume as much content as they could. And we ended up becoming a source of comfort and a source of, kind of a refuge during a very difficult time in the world. And that was a pleasant surprise.
That's an interesting viewpoint, because in the German Tolkien podcast, it feels like all of them started during COVID because it didn't have anything to do.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think that's when I started thinking about producing other things. I was never going to be able to do a daily show with Shawn's schedule, so it just sat on the back burner. And then it was something that, when he stepped down, I thought, all right, well, time for me to do this, because now I can. Yeah.
Well, we started out essentially during COVID, almost 3 years ago to the day, because you couldn't see anyone, so we just said, we've got a Discord server, come along Saturday evening, we're gonna talk, we're gonna chat, we're gonna drink, and then someone said, why not do Tolkien? And those two just basically said, yeah, Why not?
Yeah,
Here we are.
that's a good
3
idea.
years later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And it's you could never have told me 8 years ago when this first thing started. Goodness, almost 8.5 years ago now. I never would have thought that I would be here, right? That I would still be doing the show, that I would have written a book with Shawn. I also never thought that Shawn would be gone. There's some sad moments too, right? I mean, Shawn and I, had a fantastic run, and folks, please, he's coming back for the last few episodes. In fact, today, Scouring of the Shire, part 1 of 5 drops with Shawn as my co-host. He's coming back for 5 episodes on the Scouring, plus our episode 333 highlight show, which will be next week, and then 3 episodes on the Grey Havens to complete the season. So that's going to be fantastic. It's been so good to work with Shawn again. I mean, I can rave all day about my amazing co-hosts that I've had, and I have had some incredible people, and I've made new friends as a result of it. It's great. But obviously, it's always a comfort to have Shawn back in the chair. And so it's been good. But yeah, never would have thought I'd be here.
The thing is, for example, the gentleman with the white beard, that at the moment to me and this square of 4 video images, I met him at one of those Tolkien festivals like more than 20 years ago. And we only met because we had a schedule. We had like 9 to 11 in the bar. So we'd serve beer and drinks and I don't know what. And he stood behind the bar, dishing out beer. And I came in, hey, my name's Marcelo, or call me Oliver. And he said, my name's Fingolfin or Marcos. And, the rest is sort of like history because it's us still here more than 20 years later. And we still have drunk a little bit of beer last year on the weekend at the Tolkien Days.
I bet you have. I bet you have. Yeah. It's
that's the magic of the community. That's you seen the lifetime from guys who you guided through all the years. Our co-host for one part of our show. My first time I met her is she was 13, I think. Yeah, and now she is over 30 and become a teacher. And it's grateful to see all this development over the years.
Yes. Yeah, it really is amazing to watch the community and the individuals in the community grow in their love of Tolkien and in building into the community. So many people I know that have gone on to get, degrees from Signum University, Corey Olson's project. And, these people are out there, writing amazing papers and books and creating new podcasts. And, it's just fantastic. What a great time to be a Tolkien fan. I have to say that really is.
And I'm not going to give away that some people even, give second or third names taken from the books to their daughters or something. Yeah. I'm not going to give away anyone. That'll
come up in the show. That'll come up.
Yeah.
That's the kind of generation that we're glad to have, right?
Yeah. Yes, my 2 daughters. The oldest one had a third name, Galadriel, and that's my second daughter, Eowyn.
Oh wow! I was I chose to be a little more subtle. My daughter's name is Eleanor.
That was very subtle.
It's very subtle. It's just the spelling, just like the flower. Yeah. So before the Jackson films came out in 2001, at that time, my wife and I had been married maybe 8 years, I think, and she had never read the books. I had, of course, read the books a number of times. I was in the habit of reading them once a year, and so we read them together. And by that I mean I read them out loud while she followed along in her copy. And when we got to Sam wanting to know what to name his daughter, we talked about, what a lovely name that is. And if we ever had a daughter, maybe we'd name her Eleanor. And then fast forward to, that would have been 2001. And our daughter was born in 2014. And it was like, so we're going to name her Eleanor. I'm like, that's right. I'd forgotten. So, yeah.
And my daughters are, both of them, born before the Jackson movies.
Yeah.
1990s, 96 and 1990.
Yep. Yeah. And it was a good decision. The name fits her. So.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that, that now it's the first generation, in a sense, of people growing up that,
Mhm.
were born around the film trilogy. And I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
saying that there is any connection between the film trilogy and kids being born or anything. There is no connection, right? Right? Just coincidence.
no,
And
yeah.
people not getting to
Well, the
know
rest
each
is
other
nature. It's just
on
what
any
happens.
festivals or conventions or events, meeting up. Uh, but they are now the new generation that is, when people start going on the internet, when you're like writing stories, fan fiction, and then meeting other people all around the world. And now with the Rings of Power, as a really positive side effect is people are coming again to Tolkien. And let's face it,
Yeah,
this is like, I think, the last summer, so to speak, where we have a little bit of quiet and peace. But with the second season and with War of the Rohirrim and the games coming
oh
up and all the other stuff,
yeah.
we are gonna get swamped with
Yeah,
Tolkien. So, and
it's
that
gonna
is
be a very busy few years. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and that is so cool. If we can manage, just like you do with the PPP, to get some people interested, and
Mhm.
there's a Rings of Power wrap up. What is this? And then
Yeah.
coming to the PPP, and then coming to the books and the stories and the events, just like Corey's been
That's the
doing for
goal.
so many years, well, as a
Bring
Tolkien
people in.
professor. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
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 that's
that
the
is
thing.
just so
We
much fun.
It is. I mean, and kind of the mentality is, we don't want to be gatekeepers. We want to be lore masters. We want to be the people who you come to with your questions, but we're not going to say just because you come to us through. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned fanfic and then you mentioned Rings of
Yeah.
Power, and I don't think that was a coincidence.
No,
Uh,
no, no, no.
but it's okay. Very expensive fanfic is still fanfic, but it's good in the sense that it still brings people to the book. So if, let's say, people um, saw the Jackson films and then read some fanfic and decided they want to read the real books, great.
Yeah.
Same thing. People watch Rings of Power, so they've seen some fanfic. Now they want to read the books. Okay, great. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
We're not going to say, "Oh, well, you didn't read the books first, so you aren't welcome here." No,
Yeah.
no,
That's
the
absurd.
Tolkien community is much broader than that. It's much more open than
Yeah.
that, or at least it ought to be. And there's room here for fans of all experience levels, and that's what we want to be able to provide a place for. So if all you know is the Amazon show, come hang out at Rings of Power Wrap Up, and we'll talk that show. If you want to dive into the books,
Yeah.
come to the PPP. And if you want to get even deeper and do things like understanding Tolkien's letters or his biography, or you want to get into the first age, well, then come over to the TTT, where every week you get a little bit of something. So that's my objective, is to create a place where no matter where you are in the fandom, super new, super experienced, come and be a part of it somewhere. And then you'll get to know other Tolkien fans, and maybe you'll have a kid that you name Eowyn or Aragorn or whatever.
Yeah, I want to mention that the YouTube chat is grateful that your daughter's not named Shelob. So good choice, obviously. I think they
My
don't know that
daughter is
it's
great.
in
She's
Germany
not
it's
named Shelob.
Kankra, which would even be worse. So to
Yeah.
bring that in. But speaking of Rings
Yeah.
of Power, now that this
Yeah.
is your job and you are dependent on your income on it, we decided to not cover a lot of it because we don't like the show, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I think I
Would
gave
you
it a C+.
get to a point where you decide, okay, I have to make this content even though I don't really want to? Is this something that you thought about, or did you
That's a
see
fair
yourself
question.
getting into conflict at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that being a challenge. I mean, to be honest, that's kind of where season 1 of Rings of Power Wrap Up ended, because we started the show very optimistic, Shawn and I both, right? We Amazon took us out to London. We got to see the footage. We got to meet the showrunners. We felt really optimistic. I got to meet the cast at Comic-Con at the end of July that year. And I just was really encouraged by everything that I heard. And then the show came out. And and though there were moments that were good, and though there were elements of the show that were fantastic, including, let's say, cinematography and music, there were elements of the show that were poor. And I acknowledged that on season 1 of Rings of Power Wrap Up. But what we tried to do was create a place where it's okay to say that it's not great. It's okay to say that there are areas that they can get better. In the meantime, it's also okay to acknowledge that people love this, and let's talk about the story as it stands, and let's talk about the story in the context of Tolkien. If it turns out to be absolutely terrible, right? I mean, like, I think I gave season 1 a C+, but it got a D or a D- on writing. Let's say the show gets even worse.
Yeah.
I can see myself doing the content still, but trying to do it from more of a perspective of here's why I don't find this as enjoyable as I would have, right? This might be something that I would have done differently. And here's why, because of the books, and here's, how they're missing the core of the original to pull in something from Tolkien's own letters, right? There, back when he was still when he was alive and there was an adaptation that was in the works that obviously didn't come to be, he wrote a letter number 210 to Forrest Ackerman. It was about the script that Zimmerman had written for this first adaptation. And in it, he says, look, the canons of narrative art cannot be wholly different. And what he's saying is, yeah, sure, okay, I get that an adaptation is not a book and it's not going to be a word-for-word recreation, but they can't be completely different. And where these adaptations fail is in their inability to understand where the core of the original lies. And so that's sort of the thing that we look at. That's the lens that we look at all these adaptations through. So even if the show is miserable, I'm still going to, at least season 2 is going to be done. And we'll talk through maybe why it's not so great. And, but we'll also still fairly talk about its strengths, because even some of its weaknesses, like the writing, were balanced out at times by the casting and the cinematography and set designs and things like that. So we could talk about it as a show while still acknowledging the failures of it as an adaptation. And that's sort of the fine line I want to walk, because I do want to create a place that's welcoming even for people who just think the show is the best thing since sliced bread. That's fine. You're welcome here. Even if you disagree with me, that's totally okay. So, is it something I'm going to pour my heart into? Well, not if it's terrible, I mean, I'll do it and I'll make it a welcoming place, but it's not going to be something that I want to invest hours and hours and hours and hours into, especially now that I've added Today's Tolkien Times, because that's become a much larger project in terms of consumption of time. It takes a lot more for me to do that than I thought it would. I didn't think it would take that much to put together a 10-minute everyday show. I mean, after all, it's only an hour of content each week, but it takes me as much time to put together that 1 hour of content as it does for me to put together 2 hours of the PPP, right? It takes me, quite a bit of time, because I'm doing a lot of research. I'm just condensing it. But it's all scattered across the different, the different days. So,
you have different categories, obviously. So you have to do sort of different levels of research and different things that you can work from.
Correct.
And I do remember, I mean, we started out when The Rings of Power came out, let's do the first or 2 episodes. And then because we weren't quite happy, or as happy as we'd love to be, we said, let's just do, when the whole episodes are through, and then we'll talk about it for like 2 hours, and that's good. I'm a huge fan of people like Arondir and Disa, who are invented characters, because they are just the casting and how they play it, as I love them. So right now, as a bit of a Trekkie, I'm hoping we are at the Star Trek Next Generation moment, where the first 2 seasons were like, "Nyom, nyom." They had their moments, but they were like also hilariously bad on different episodes with Next Gen. And
Oh
then
man,
in the third
season 2
season,
during
it
the
all
writer's strike, that was
God,
bad.
some of the stuff that was just original series, same clothing, same cutting, same cinematography, and you thought, it's like you're in the 80s now, and you can have all sorts of stuff. Why are you doing this? But, that's what I'm hopeful for, that, they have 5 seasons. They have a lot of resources. There are a lot of great people there. So let's just hope that in a couple of years' time, we will look back at, well, at the beginning, it was a bit difficult.
The bones are there. I like that comparison to Next Gen, because the bones of the show didn't change. You still had, Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes and LeVar Burton and Michael Dorn. Those people all developed in their characters, and the writing got better, and the story got better, and the uniforms got better, and the show, so there is hope, and that's the thing. I mean, if there's anything Tolkien has taught us, there's always hope, and so I'm a little more cautiously optimistic than I was this time 2 years ago. I'm a little more prepared to be disappointed, but I'm also, perfectly willing to be amazed and have it be fantastic. Because, like you said, some of the filling in the blanks, like you said, Disa and Arondir, these completely made up characters, were great. They were some of the highlights of the show. or the Elrond and Durin moments that, of course, were made up, but were fantastic.
Yeah.
So there are elements, but we'll see. It isn't where I put my time. My time is going to be always on getting people to the books. That's the effort.
Can you sort of, because you just mentioned it, as an aside, but there are 1 or 2 projects that you're planning to do. Is there anything you could share with the community today? Here, SmallTalk.
Well, Katie's here, so if I say anything that's a spoiler, I'm going to be in deep trouble with my right hand of the show.
Yep.
There's I'm trying to figure out how to. It
I can
says
see
she is
Katie sitting
typing in
behind
the
her
chat,
keyboard, go
so
like,
I know.
Alan, watch out. Oh man.
Let's just say that there is a project that I want to do that would involve live streaming once a week, maybe twice. That's all I'll say about, because I'm not going to put anything out there about content. But the idea is to give me a little bit of a break and to do something fun, lighthearted, and enjoyable for everybody. So, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, but the thing is, if I look at your schedule, really, to be honest, the amount of time and preparation that you need to put in because the guys, we know how much effort we are putting in with this show. So we do not have like thousands of followers because we invest a limited amount of time and energy into. I mean, seriously. I mean, the guys, particularly Sebastian, is doing a lot of stuff in preparation, and Oppa just the same. But because we know how much time and energy you have to invest to go through all of the Lord of the Rings and do 5 or 6 episodes just for the scouring of the Shire. That's not something that we want to do. We'll try to be a bit more lighthearted, be obviously chaotic as well, but that's the thing that we love about our thing. It came from bringing friends into it, and all of these friends have stayed with us, and a number of people have come to that. And the most successful thing we have is actually ranking topics. And I think one of our most successful videos and podcast episodes we still have is flirt techniques in Middle Earth ranked.
Oh man. All right.
That is very serious stuff.
Yeah. I wish I'd taken a look at that during the time that I spent on the Faramir and Eowyn storyline in Stewart and the King. But it's not like Faramir needed game. That guy he's a pro. But I hear what you mean about the time. You're right. That's something that I probably, because of the season 2 of Rings of Power is coming out, I'm going to have to shelve my other project until that's over. So maybe October, where I had hoped to maybe launch it this summer. But it's it is a time-consuming thing. I love doing it though. That's the thing. I mean, I've just opened up. I took a look at the word count for my outline for Scouring of the Shire. Now, Scouring of the Shire, as you know, is not a particularly. It's a very dialogue-heavy chapter, so there's not as much to talk about. I mean, there's some thematic material, of course, near the end, especially. But that chapter with 5 episodes, my outline was 25,000 words. So
wow.
The amount of time and effort that goes into producing that show. Probably each episode
could I just interject? A regular German novel, when you're asking someone who wants to become an author, what is the word count that you would have to bring to the table to a publisher, is 60,000. So you're basically just 2 or 3 episodes or, another chapter, you are on your way to actually writing a novel. That's the same amount of
Why We Love
preparation,
Middle Earth
right?
is 105,000 words. Our book, which I'll show you right here, if I can find it.
Oh, yeah, you
Where
can
did
find
I
it.
put
I'm
my
sure.
book? Here it is.
Oh my God, where did I put my copy?
So our book is 105,000 words, but my typical chapter outline is anywhere from 15 to 25,000 words. So it's and I'm doing 8 to 10 of those every season. So it's a project for sure. And, I'm happy to do it. I love doing it. It's a lot of fun, but it is a lot of time. So, and I couldn't do it if it weren't for my patrons and supporters of the show. I mean, that's the reality. That's what enabled me to put that much time into it. And for a few years, it's what enabled Shawn to continue to put as much time into it as he did. It was hard. It was a lot of work. And, I think for me, if it weren't for the fact that my other day jobs had been the kind of things where I could simply do it less if I was making, if I was pouring more time into one, I could pour less into another. If I've got 50 to 55 hours a week that I can pour into work and I'm pouring 35 of it here, well, then I can do 10 on these other two. But, it was the kind of thing where I could always give and take from my other positions. That wasn't always the case, if you're working for somebody else. So that made it a challenge. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's absolutely worth every single minute of it. I love doing it.
See,
So talk to me about these rankings. I got to know about the rankings now. I'm totally curious. Drop me some wisdom here on the rankings.
It really translates really badly because Sebastian, the Mountain King, right? Seppel is a master of the worst puns in the history of the German language. So whatever he does, and I mean that in an incredibly respectful and envious way, because what he comes up with is so horrible. Because top tiers, like the first tier, like it's from 1 to 5. It's a 1 to 5 ranking, right? So the first is the best, 5 is the worst. But it's not like a school in a sense grading. He comes up with wordplays and puns in the titles. Now I'm trying to quickly get to some of the
hard
stuff
to
that we
translate
had.
that and still keep the humor for sure.
So, for example, we had we did a ranking of the mountains in the Lord of the Rings, right? So to come up with this, he had the tier 5 was Andrea Berg. Berg is the German word for mountain, right? So you have a ranking of mountains. What you don't know, Andrea Berg is a horrible Schlager country singing lady who is horrible, and he is a metalhead, so he doesn't like Schlager. He doesn't like music, right? He doesn't like the polka. So the worst tier is that singer, and in tier 4, it's Bergil, which is a character from Tolkien stories, but he has the element of Berg, which is mountain again. So it's a horrible pun as well. Tier 3 is Jugendherberge, which is youth hostel, but there is the word Berg again in it. You get the pattern here. So it is the worst punner imaginable. And the next one is Giuseppe Bergomi. What's that guy again? Is that a footballer?
Footballer, yeah, who won the World Cup in '82. Yeah.
Well, he's Italian.
It's an Italian.
He's Italian, so he gets a tier 2. Is of course an Italian footballer. His name Bergomi, which is a berg. It's the mountain, so that's a pun. And the top tier is Kreuzberger Nächte. Now that is on so many different levels stupid. It's the song of one of those Schlager fun bands from the 80s from a part of Berlin which is called Kreuzberg. It's a suburb from Berlin. So again, there is a mountain in it. But it's a horrible Schlager song. Everyone knows who's been to German Carnival or Oktoberfest or anything. Anyone knows that, if you're a little bit older. So all of this, every single time, people come in for the rankings, for his tiers, just for the levels that he comes up with, because they want to see that.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. But you're right. It is hard puns to translate into other languages. That's fair. We have a few punsters in our community as well, and I groan every time they show up to our Questions After Nightfall episodes or to our Discord hangouts. But they're
you cannot escape them, right?
Yeah. It's our approach to Tolkien for this podcast. We don't go through the books. We don't say we know everything. We don't want to analyze everything that other people have analyzed so much better. We enjoy the connection between Tolkien and the world, the pop culture. Life experiences, where these cross over. This is the themes that we care about most in this podcast, and it includes silliness and humor and all these things as well. So that's what we do.
And that's
it gives you a different perspective, because if you talk about ranking the mountains in Tolkien, you would have never thought about are the Misty Mountains better then I don't know, any other of the mountains like Mordor's, if you have Eredun on this one, or is maybe that mountain, is that better? And you think, why could you possibly, I mean, some of the guys came up with, if you're on Sirak Zigil and the dwarves have, that could be a point for tourism, right? People can come up and, tour around the world, do a bit of like fourth age tourism. So that's a cooler mountain than the White Mountains, right? So,
I don't
and
know. I
then you
mean,
come up
you
with,
could go to the spot where Gandalf died after slaying the Balrog and smote the mountain in his ruin, or you could go to the White Mountains and find the spot where Aragorn discovered the sapling. They're both great tourist spots.
yeah,
Yeah.
You're both you're definitely going to set up admission. You're going to put, there's going to be a little monument there. You're going to have, a cable car or funicular that takes you up to the location that you got to pay for, of course, all to maintain the tourist attraction. Yeah.
dwarves
Yeah.
obviously have to invent the technology of the elevator because of the endless stair. You would not go up by
The
foot,
endless
so you will
stairs. I'm
have
not
to.
doing the endless stairs. No.
And then there's Rings of Power who invent the elevator.
Oh no.
Yeah, see, that's
We
the kind of
also
connection that we are making during our episodes.
Yep, I hear that.
we have
I
also
hear that.
we have also episodes of the holidays. We have how create Christmas in Middle Earth or
Oh, fun.
Easter, and we look all this all this countries and talk about what do you think about the Shire make holidays? What do you to make the Christmas and other days?
Yeah, last weekend we had the Dragon's Den, this investment show on television, and
Yeah.
the ends would come around as Christmas trees because that's expansion of, their interests. They would come around as Christmas trees and go to the different regions of Middle Earth as, ambassadors of goodwill, and, maybe find the end wives. You never know, so.
The best ideas was all the festivals on different locations.
Yeah, the best
Different-
investment everyone said, yes, we're going to invest is all the festivals that are actually happening right now in Europe, like Tollwood or Elven Jazz in Hamburg or, Wacken, which is this metal festival. And the person who did that just took the text, the advertisement text to those and added just images from the films or from Tolkien illustrators and adapted that to Middle Earth. So you would
Nice.
go to Casa Doom for like a metal convention and all this stuff,
course.
and everyone was going to invest in that because that is bringing people together, right? Different species. If the dwarves invite you to come along to Casa Doom for some decent metal, people from Lorien will come along as well. Some hobbits will come along. So
But not
music
the
brings
very
the world
best
together.
metal, because the very best metal is still deep down, and if you dig for it, you're going to wake up something you don't want to wake up. So just good metal, not the best metal.
Yeah. Oh man,
goodness. Good stuff. Yeah.
so we are trying to keep to that 1 hour limit in a sense because I know we can now easily talk for like 2 or 3 hours with you, Alan. That is
Oh, it's
no
easy,
problem at
yeah.
all. And we'd love to do that, but I know you have a day ahead of you, and
I do,
we have the rest of the day in front of us.
The
Or do you
rest
have
of your
any
day. It's
questions,
already
guys?
late in your evening, right? It's already 6 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, guys? For Alan that you
Yeah,
need
I
to
have
ask
time
him?
for another question or two if you want to fire away. All right.
Now it is your chance. Come on, try it.
No, I think it's a good wrap up for the hour. I mean, I do have
Okay.
some
Yeah.
questions, but they would go on for an own episode if we follow it through. So not doing it right
Yeah.
now, but maybe we will see each other again.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be around. Let me know.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And
Same.
well, maybe next time we can talk about a much better season 2 of a certain series or a
I hope
film
so.
or a
I hope so.
game. There's so
Or
much
we can
stuff
wait
coming up.
until winter and we can talk about a really good adaptation of the War of the Rohirrim, I would hope. I'm optimistic about that. Very, very optimistic.
Oh, I can see us, the 4 elderly guys. We're doing some cozy gaming, like Tales of in the Shire,
Tales
and
of
we just sit
Shire,
around
yeah.
and exchange herbs. And you can get me some tea, and Oppa is gonna bring some food, and we're gonna do a barbecue. Oh, that'd be lovely. Oh, live streaming. Oh, remember the live streaming project that you have? Okay.
We'll see. Yeah.
Katie, I know I can see her like
I'm not
typing
going to say
furiously.
anything. I can't say anything. Are you kidding me? I'm just getting in so much trouble if I say anything.
It's been a long time that we've been called impish Germans, and we are very happy about that. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
Thank you
thank you
very
for
much,
having me,
Alan.
guys. It was a pleasure to meet
Yeah.
each of you, especially. I mean, Marcel, it's good to see you again, but good to meet the two of you guys. And I hope to actually see you all in person at Tolkien Talk next year. So
That'd be
I hope so.
fantastic. So let's
We will try our
keep
best.
fingers crossed for next year. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for being around, and we'll see you next week on Sunday, 8 o'clock. Bye-bye.
thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Danke, dass du dir diese Folge SmallTalk angehört hast. Wir hoffen, sie hat dir gefallen. Wenn du dich über unseren Podcast informieren möchtest, kannst du das gerne über unsere Social-Media-Kanäle tun. Du findest uns auf Facebook und auf Instagram als SmallTalk und auf Twitter als SmallTalkPod wie in Podcast. Dort findest du auch immer den direkten Link zu unserem Discord-Server, auf dem du live mit dabei oder dich mit anderen Tolkien-Fans austauschen kannst. Am meisten freuen wir uns natürlich über ein Like oder ein Gefällt mir oder noch besser, du abonnierst uns beim Podcast-Anbieter deines Vertrauens. Das hilft uns nicht nur auf unserem Weg zu Ruhm und Reichtum, sondern es bietet uns auch die Möglichkeit, mehr Leuten Mittelerde näher zu bringen. Vielen Dank im Voraus und vielleicht hören wir uns ja schon bald wieder. Eine neue Folge wird jeden Dienstagabend hochgeladen. Wir freuen uns auf jeden Fall.